While an entire league just knelt,
Isaac stands his ground.
Jonathan Isaac stood tall, not just as an NBA player,
You cannot stand for God and God not stand for you.
but as a man of God.
You said when necessary, use words.
He's so much more than just an NBA star.
First round draft pick,
Jonathan Isaac.
We are taught to be Christ-like.
You're the only Jesus that people will meet.
The best instincts on defense I've ever seen.
Rejected by Isaac.
I want to be a mirror to a young kid that's going, I want to be like Jonathan Isaac.
Orlando Magic select Jonathan Isaac.
Terrific young talent, an even better human being.
The vision for UNITUS in the beginning was just, I'm going to be able to take the word of God with me on the court.
You can't tell someone how to fight the fight.
I don't you understand how crazy this is going to be.
This is We the People, and this is Jonathan Isaac.
We the people. Why you quiet? It's time to stand up for the truth. How they coming for our kids, so who gon' stand up for the youth? Ay, and we know we win because Yeshua is the proof. Ay, we the people like Gates Garcia, so that's no excuse.
In a world where silence is safe and going along gets applause, today's guest chose the harder road. He stood, literally. While an entire league just knelt, Jonathan Isaac stood tall, not just as an NBA player, but as a man of God, rooted in truth, conviction, and courage. You might know him as a forward for the Orlando Magic, but this story goes far beyond basketball. He's the author of Why I Stand, a powerful testimony of faith in the fire. He's also the founder of UNITUS, a clothing brand that isn't trying to follow trends, but reshape culture through biblical values and unapologetic truth. And in a month where every corporation is busy waving the rainbow flag, Jonathan is waving a different one that points to faith, family, and the freedom to stand firm in what's right. We're going to talk about his journey through anxiety, through injury, through pressure, and what it means to live boldly in a time when most people play it safe. We'll also dive into his vision for changing the culture, not just on the court, but in the marketplace. This is a conversation about manhood, faith, and what happens when one person refuses to bend the knee to culture and instead bows only to God. This is We the People, and this is Jonathan Isaac. How you doing, Jonathan?
I'm doing great, man. Thank you so much for having me on.
Oh yeah, well we got to start with some housekeeping items. So one of my good friends here in Tampa, his name's Drew. He might be the biggest Orlando Magic fan that exists, and so I let him submit any question he wanted, and I figured it'd be something from the book or something from your life. All he wants to know about is what you think of the new uniforms.
I love them. I think they did a great job. Bringing the pinstripes back was a great touch. I know that I've been waiting for it. I know that our fans have been waiting for it for the longest time. So I'm glad they did it.
Yeah, I'm in Tampa, so the closest market to us is Orlando. So I grew up kind of on the Shaq and Penny days, and it's kind of an ode to my childhood seeing the pinstripes come back. So I'm glad y'all did that as well. All right, let's get into some more serious stuff. I want to sort of frame the narrative by starting out with a quote from your book, and then we'll sort of backtrack to kind of go back to the beginning of how we got there. So you say in your book, Why I Stand, my stand wasn't about me. I wanted to point people to the answer. Jesus. That was the line in the book that sort of kind of jumped out and hit me in the chest. And it was powerful then, and I think it's reverberating today. So I want, take listeners back to the bubble when sort of all this was happening. We had civil unrest in the country with the BLM riots. We had, lockdowns. We had the COVID craze going on, and you were bold and you sort of bucked the trend of what was not popular in society. What gave you the strength then to take the stand when there was so much pressure to conform to the narrative? And what message are you still trying to convey today?
Yeah, I would say what gave me the strength is that I really did believe that Christ was the answer. The hard part was that all the other outstanding circumstances made it difficult to follow through with that belief, but it was what I believed. There was obviously, like you said, the civil unrest. Everything was so polarizing. I knew that I was going to get attacked. I knew that some people wouldn't understand where I was coming from. My contract extension was up that summer. And so there was a monetary piece of it where it's like, hey, if I go through with this, there's a possibility that I'm not in the NBA anymore, or the NBA sees me as kind of a liability, or my team at least sees me as a liability and doesn't want to have that headache. That's a real thing. And so inside of myself, I said, I see the problem, and I believe that Christ is the answer. Now, what do I do with that? And I was presented with the moment of, am I going to kneel for the national anthem and wear a Black Lives Matter t-shirt? I decided not to. because I didn't believe that that was the answer that I could co-sign. And but all the outstanding other circumstances made it so much more difficult. And I think that's the thing that I've been try my best to convey. And what I was trying my best to convey, even at that time, was that I see the problem, right? Like I'm not discounting what happened to George Floyd. I'm not discounting the history of our country. I'm not discounting the hardships that, that one African American still face, today in our country, even if they may be, at a lesser amount. I'm not discounting all of that. What I'm saying is that I see the problem. I believe that Christ is the solution, not just for African Americans, but for everybody, and not just for racism, for all the things that plague our society that ultimately come from the hearts of men. This is the answer, the gospel, humbling ourselves to the truth and loving each other as Christ loves us, which is in spite of our sin, in spite of our shortcomings, and choosing to love in the face of hatred, in the face of evil, because it's not all one-sided. And that's what a lot of people were trying to parade at that time, that we were all victims, and it's just not the truth. And so, that was the biggest thing that I was trying to convey now. And even today is that Christ is the answer. He's the rock. He's the foundation. And my pastor, he kept harping on this one verse that says, Jesus talking to him, and he says, if I be lifted up, I would draw all men to myself. And I felt like that was a moment to go, I'm not going with the culture per se. I'm not going with what everybody else says. I'm going to go with what Jesus said, which was, if I be lifted up. So I'm going to take this moment and lift up his name. And of course I got a ton of bad backlash, but I also got a ton of good, coming back to me where people understood where I was coming from and felt that I did the right thing.
Well, and actions speak louder than words. And a lot of times in our country, when there is unrest or disagreements, people just want to shout as loudly as possible. And it just goes into this giant echo chamber and bounces off one another. And we end up back at square one. Someone like you took action. And what I didn't know was that you did it in a contract year. Something that comes up often on this show is people putting real risk on the table to promote their values. It would have been a lot easier had you done that with 3 years left on your contract. But it speaks a lot to you as a man. And obviously, as a basketball player, that you were able to sort of weather that storm and then sign a new contract and move on from there. And your platform has provided others an opportunity to say, if Jonathan can do that, so can I. So I commend you for that. The action you took was to stand and show pride for our country with an understanding of history, but also to promote the word of Christ, because that's the loudest voice in any room in the world. So now I do want to go back to the beginning, because you talk about your upbringing in the book. And I think anytime you meet somebody in a place in their life, it's important to understand sort of what brought them to that place, because you're obviously a man of high character. I would love to learn more about your upbringing, because the book talks about, growing up with facing challenges, but you didn't see them as setbacks. You saw them as setups for something greater. And I think it takes a real perspective for someone to either in the moment or later in life realize that a challenge was something that just had to be overcome and just a step on the ladder. So let's rewind. Let's go back to you. Maybe it was battling anxiety or insecurity when you were growing up. How did your upbringing of family and faith shape the man that we as fans and as a culture are seeing today, someone who's clearly not afraid to go against the grain?
Yeah, I would say looking back, I definitely see a lot of those challenges of my early childhood as opportunities of growth, and ultimately led me to where I am now. But I definitely didn't see that in the moment. And the thing that when people ask me about the book, and this will all tie in, but the thing that I love about the book so much isn't the stand. It isn't the COVID or anything like that. It's the fact that I'm able to tell a story of ultimately the truth of the transformative power of Christ, where people can take a picture and say, hold on, it wasn't this guy that was courageous his whole life or bold his whole life that God said, hey, do this, and it was some easy decision to make. It was the kid who was on anxiety medication in college to play basketball. It was the kid who, struggled to make friends early on and battled severe anxiety all through his life, that God ultimately got a hold of and taught him how to be fearless through Christ. And that has helped me. And even the word fearless, I feel like doesn't correctly categorize me, because I've done everything that I felt called to do. I've done it afraid. I just was willing to still move forward, even though I was afraid. And so, my parents had us in church all the time growing up, but it was just something that was a tradition for me personally. I didn't really understand what it meant to be in relationship with Christ and the sacrifice that God made on my behalf. and what that sacrifice ultimately granted me, which is, fellowship and relationship and peace with God. I didn't understand that. And so once I got my hands on basketball, Christianity kind of went in the back burner, and I just, wanted to experience everything that basketball and, the world had to offer. And it wasn't until I got into the NBA that a pastor that I met on an elevator said to me, "I can tell you how to be great." And I said, "How?" And he said, "You have to know Jesus." And that man became my pastor and taught me about the love of Christ, taught me about what it means to love God and to know God. And, the rest is history.
So for you, it was sort of, someone being placed in your life, walking into your life, or walking into an elevator that brought you to Christ. But what do you say to the people watching this or listening to this that are sort of on the fringe? I mean, I have a lot of friends that are sort of agnostic. They're not deeply religious, but they certainly know something exists out there, and we're sort of like this part of a greater plan. But they don't want to put their thumb on the scale and say, well, it's this Jesus thing or God. But I know that through the right evangelization, we can get them there. What do you say to someone that just maybe they have that toe in the water, but they need to meet that person on the elevator?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is I believe I don't remember exactly where I heard this quote, but funny enough, I think it was from you. I think you said it yesterday when we tried to do this podcast. Uh you said something about preaching the gospel and when necessary use words,
I did
right?
say that, Jonathan.
And that is the answer. There's another saying that says, "You're the only Jesus, that people will meet," or something like that. And so, it's not our job to save anybody. We can't save anybody. The Bible says, for a man to come, he must be drawn, and that's a work of the Spirit. And so our job is to model what it is to be in relationship with Christ and allow God's goodness to, reign in our lives, and our understanding and our faith in Christ to ultimately be, how we live. And people see that. And, in a world that is dominated by who drives the best, who has the most excess, and that is where people find peace and happiness. It's created a broken world of people who are either finding all their value in that or insecure about their value because of that. And that gives us a prime opportunity to teach them, what it is to know God and to be loved by God and to find your identity in God. And I'm not saying it's easy. Evangelism is difficult, but I do think it's just about loving people, because that's one thing that the world does not do, and it can't do, because the world is void of love. There is no love or true love that loves you for who you are and who you were created to be, and not what you can do for me or what I can get from you. So obviously there's a theological sense where I feel like there is a reliability to the history of Christianity and the truth of that. And I think that that's great to portray too. But I think that at the end of the day, anything that's going to tip the scale for most people is going to be the love that you show and the truth of Christ. Him revealing that to them is what ultimately makes the difference.
Yeah, preach the gospel, when necessary, use words. We are taught to be Christ like. We
Yep.
should be the best representation of him on earth. We will never live up to those standards, but the better we strive to, the better impact we'll leave on others. And the better, courage is contagious. A lot of things are
Absolutely.
contagious. And, I often find that the more people that learn the story of Jesus or God, or the Bible, they want to learn more. They're curious enough to say there's something to this. I met someone recently who had been in gangs and has gang tattoos all over his body, and he was miserable, and he realized that the only happy people in his life were people that went to church. So what did he do? He went to church, and the rest is history. He converted to Catholicism, actually, and devoted the rest of his life to his Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. I mean, you're an example of another way to say preach the gospel when necessary use words is to say lead by example. And you're a living embodiment of someone who's leading by example in a league where it's not always popular to lead by the example that you are leading. And you say in your book, the pressure in the NBA isn't just about performance. There's pressure to think a certain way, speak a certain way, and believe a certain way. This hasn't changed in sports in general, and maybe it's even gotten worse over the years. What's it like right now to be a man of faith and a man of conviction in a league where culture, or I'll just say in sports, where culture often rewards silence over conformity? What challenges are you facing, Jonathan, on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, I think the right word is culture over necessarily one league, because honestly, it's the culture of our time to celebrate things that would be, in opposition to Christ or godly values or morals or things like that. So it's difficult. It has its difficulties. It's hard to be unashamed and not rub anybody the wrong way or ruffle any feathers, which is difficult and it's tough, but it's also kind of the way that it's supposed to be. When you are going in a different direction, people notice that, and people either are indifferent about it or they don't like it. And so that's just a part of life. And I've faced my own challenges, being in the NBA or just being in the culture of the mainstream and making decisions to say, you know what, I'm not perfect, but I believe that Christ is Lord, and I'm going to try my best to live in a way that glorifies Him, and that's come with decisions that not everybody likes, or stances that not everybody likes. So yeah.
So here's what I really want to ask you, because as a consumer, fan, spectator, whatever you want to label me, I get an outsider's perspective, and it's not just sports. It's many areas of society where the narrative says one thing, but behind the scenes, other things are happening. Other conversations are taking place. I mean, I saw it when I worked in the corporate world. We would sort of say things inside the cubicles in the offices than we would out in the hallways. What are conversations like with your teammates? What's the locker room culture? Are there any stories of teammates or coaches that you have transformed? Are there anybody you've evangelized? What goes on behind the scenes from the reaction standpoint to the things you promote?
Yeah, so conversations actually come up quite often. Just if it's not super deep, but just around faith. I pray mostly before every game. When we go out into the court, I'll pray with the team just before we get out there. And so there are these inflection points and moments where, or even guys have questions that I've answered, or guys going through tough times. I've tried my best to be there for some of my teammates in the past that were going through things, and prayed for them and tried to speak into it and speak into their lives. So I won't name names, but it absolutely does happen. And even with some of the difficult decisions, I've had great conversations of guys saying, hey, if this was to happen again, I would go about it differently than I did the way before. I would follow, your model or the way that you went about it. And yeah, so I've had great conversations, had opportunities to pray with guys, bring guys to church, and again, just try my best to be authentically me. And I feel like I've garnered the respect of a lot of my peers, regardless if they believe what I believe or not, because of the way that I've chosen to go about it, which isn't combative, which isn't me trying to again preach to you, but ultimately live my life in a way that glorifies God, and they're taking notice.
And you don't just have teammates on the court; you have teammates at home. You have these new babies that are, I think,
Yeah.
1 and 2 years old. And I know from the perspective of someone that has a 10-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 4-year-old, fatherhood completely transformed the way I see the world. It's a whole nother level of leadership. It's the one job, you're not qualified to do that you all of a sudden do. There's no training to become a father. I'm curious to know how you sort of pass these values down to your kids. I know they're young. I know you're not having deep conversations with them right now, but they're going to read your book. They're going to see clips of you from the NBA. They're going to see podcasts like this. What are you trying to do as you bring these kids up into a world that doesn't always necessarily accept the things that you believe?
Yeah, well, first off, shout out to my wife for
Great
blessing
answer.
with two babies. We got the 2-year-old and really the 2-month-old, not even a year yet. She's
Okay.
2 months old, and so my wife is holding down the fort while I train and get ready for next season. Uh, I think the best way to do it, again, even in the same kind of way of being in the world, is to model it. I think one of the worst things that we can do as parents is speak one thing and model something different. And so my biggest burden would be how to model the love of God to my kids, how to model a godly relationship between me and my wife to my kids, so that they grow up with that as a picture. Ultimately, they have decisions to make as they grow up, but at least they have a picture of, man, I remember the way my dad, treated mom. And I remember how dad would talk about loving God and faith, and also the mercies of God. And it's not about being perfect. It's about striving to become better. And I think that depositing those seeds, like the Bible says, when they get older, they won't depart, when you do that properly. So I'd say that's the thing that I think about the most. But also fatherhood it's been challenging well, it's not challenging, but it has been that, but it's caused a lot of reflection too, where it's like, I see the picture of why God calls us children, and how, kids, they don't know anything. And you have to sometimes repeatedly over and over again instruct them and allow them to go their own way, and instruct them again, and the patience that's necessary to to rear children where they don't have anxiety issues about you snapping off and you throwing things and yelling and everything like that. It's so difficult. And so, the Bible calls God a good father. And so I see that dichotomy of like, God, this is how you see us. This is how you see me. You love me unconditionally. It's not something that you're trying to do. You're not trying to love me. I don't have to try to love my daughters. There's a well of love in me for them, and they haven't earned it. They haven't done anything to earn it. They're just who they are, and they can't do anything for me. And so, it's a beautiful picture.
Yeah, it's the ultimate sacrifice, doing things for a human that can't do anything for themselves at an age like that. I always say that, becoming a father made me a better son. It gave me a whole new perspective
That's a
of
bar.
of the other end of the bargain,
Yeah,
right? Like I
that's
was
a
always
bar.
on one side of the equation, and now I was on the other, and I was like, oh my gosh, man, I'm a pain in the ass. I argue, I push back, I don't listen, all these sorts of
Right.
things. And I think over time I've gotten older, but I think I've gotten better at those things because I've seen what my parents had to deal with. It's just made
Right.
me a better
Exactly.
son.
Exactly.
And
I
then
gotta
another,
write that down. That was a good
yeah.
one.
And
That was
then
a good one.
another great piece of advice, because my first was a girl, and I know that's the same. You're 2 year olds. You have 2 girls?
Two girls. Yep.
Yeah. So, somebody told me when I had a daughter, they said, expect her boyfriends that come in the home to resemble you. I said, what do you mean? And she goes, her only example of how a man is supposed to treat a woman is how you treat your wife, her mother. So the way you treat your wife, her mother in the home, should be what she is going to be conditioned to look for in a man. So if she
Mhm.
brings home a jerk and you're a jerk, don't be surprised and don't be angry. Look in the mirror, because that's on you. It's obviously not always going to work
Of
out that way,
course.
but I just remember that advice in the back of my mind. They're always watching, as you say. So Jonathan, if you could wave a wand and sort of insert Jesus or biblical principles into one ill in society, and I'll let you choose what it is, where do you think society needs God the most right now?
I'd say education, but in a kind of philosophical sense. What the person that comes to mind is Jordan Peterson.
Mhm.
And he isn't all the way there in terms of being a sold out believer, but I think that he has tastefully introduced a lot of people to the idea of God being a foundation, and not just some religious jargon of, we serve God, we love God, but that there are real consequences, and also benefits, and also there's a reality to life that is biblical. And the Bible has a framework of how to live. And so I would say from a young age, I would love for the reintroduction of the Bible and Christianity into the education of our young kids, to where it's not something that this is what you have to believe, but this is a viable belief, and a way for you to orient and live your life, and ultimately the choice is up to you. And that's obviously wishful, because today, if we do that, then every religion has to have the same courtesy. But yeah, if I could, like you said, it's a wave my wand. If I could wave my wand,
Mhm.
it wouldn't be to force people to believe. It would be to introduce belief at a younger age to kids across the country.
Yeah, and I like the Jordan Peterson example. And you make the comment that he's not all the way there, but what I like about Jordan Peterson, because I've sort of followed his evolution of faith for many years, he's sort of figuring it out in
Yep,
front of us.
absolutely. In front of, exactly. That's a great point.
Yeah,
In front of
he's sort
everybody.
of showing one man's way of walking to certain conclusions, and how others can sort of go through that process with him. And I think he's brought a lot of people along with him from a place of no religion to a lot closer to God than they've ever been, if not all the way there. And on education, more in general, and children and everything, I think what we could do a better job of as Christians is making it more relatable.
Yep.
Growing up, kids don't want to go to church. Even adults don't want to go to church. You have the one ones that go on Christmas and Easter because it feels ritualistic or like an obligation. Church can be intimidating. I mean, I'm in the Catholic faith, and the Catholic faith is, the mass is rigid and it doesn't have the guitar and drums in the corner and all that. So for me in the beginning, I converted as an adult. It was very intimidating. But once I was able to break it down into more relatable terms through other avenues, it was more inviting to me because I could say, wow, this is actually how these things occur in my real life and how I can apply them in my real life. And yeah, we could certainly do a better job of evangelizing others through different forms of education. And luckily the media landscape through digital platforms and just sort of the open panacea now that exists in the media through YouTube and all these other channels, we're seeing more people have the ability to do that. One way you're doing it.
Just to
Go
say,
ahead, Jonathan.
even back to the Jordan Peterson thing, the thought came to my mind. You could even argue that he has taken things more seriously in the way that he has, like you talked about him learning and growing in front of us. I feel like at times, even with some of the videos I've watched, he's taking very seriously the idea of belief and what that means, and that it's not just a flippant thing to say, I believe, because ultimately to believe is to surrender. All right, to know God, to love God is to surrender to God. And so I just to point that out, that because he's doing that in front of everybody's face, at times I could argue that he's taking it very, very, very seriously, for him to utter the words, I believe in God and I serve God and I know God, because, even in times of my own life, I've taken that and used that as a banner and not something that I was truly walking with in my heart.
Amen to that. And another way that you are evangelizing others is through your clothing line, UNITUS.
Yes, sir.
I love this stuff. It isn't just a fashion line. I mean, it's a movement. We've had Jen say on this show who has XXXY, and it's a similar way to say, by wearing a shirt, I can wear my values. I'm a rolling billboard for Christ or whatever you believe in, and you're doing that. And during Pride Month, when we're seeing sort of every brand roll out rainbow logos, that's not real unity. That's just signaling an ideology. Right. You've taken a different path. What was your vision for UNITUS, and how are you showing people it's possible to build a brand rooted in biblical truth and lasting values without bending to cultural pressure?
Yeah, so UNITUS started out with really just the sneaker. And so it was the Judah 1. And so the vision for that was that, at the time in the bubble, I was signed to Nike. So I was a Nike athlete, and I ended up getting injured, and, they decided not to re-sign me, which is fully in their right. But I remember going to my pastor and saying, hey, I don't have a shoe brand. And when I come back from this injury, I'm either going to try to go back with Nike, maybe Adidas or somebody else. And he said, you should make your own sneaker. And so the vision for UNITUS in the beginning was just, I'm going to be able to take the word of God with me on the court. It's the first NBA signature sneaker with visible Bible verses on the outside. And so I was able to, all of last season, wear the word with me on an NBA basketball court. That wasn't written in. It was a part of the shoe to begin with. And so that was the vision for that. And then it ballooned into, why just do a shoe? Why not create an entire brand that's founded on being able to connect to one another and ultimately stay connected to Christ? And so when I put on a UNITUS t-shirt, when I wear UNITUS shoes, they're touch points to the word, touch points to other people who are wearing the same thing, and ultimately building this community of people saying, hey, we're in this together, we're united as one. And this gives us an outside touch point than just saying, I'm a believer, to each other. And of course, staying connected to God. So one of the great things that I love about the brand is that, evangelism is definitely a piece of it, right? When people see your shoes and people see your clothes and they say, hey, what's that? That's a great way to evangelize. But I love that what we're focused on more so is, what does it mean to you? And so the verse that I'm wearing on my UNITUS Fortress right now is that he who honors God, God will honor. So when I put those shoes on, it's a reminder to me to honor God, to try my best to strive to honor God in my everyday life, not so much worrying about what everybody else is doing. And so that's how, one, I'm staying connected to Christ with that touch point. And again, when I see somebody else wearing it, I get that, yeah, you get it. You're doing the same thing.
So, Jonathan, one of the things that I am very passionate about is the nuclear family and sort of all the pressures from society that are coming in to attack the nuclear family. I've said my listeners get tired of me saying that I think, the nuclear family, other than the church, is probably the most important institution in society. And if we lose the nuclear family, it's like kicking the legs out from one of the stools. Everything else will crumble. One thing that I see being attacked, like never before right now, is masculinity, manhood, all the things that make men be great in society. I think there's a distinct role for men in society, and I think we're doing a disservice teaching young men, boys, to apologize for being men. I'm not asking you to necessarily stand on that soapbox with me, but I do want to know, what your message is to young men, especially Christian men who sort of feel out of place in culture right now. Maybe it's a Jonathan Isaac at 14 or a Jonathan Isaac at 18. What do you say to them, and what type of legacy are you leaving through your book and through your work to boys in culture?
A few things. The first thing I'll say is that even to the cultural aspect of everything that you just talked about, it's really seeing and understanding that it's biblical, and it's a spirit, and how the Bible says that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers, and how this is a tool of the enemy to strip men of identity, to strip men of masculinity, and to be subservient to others in a way that's not leading with character and integrity. And there's a lot of people who say, the whole toxic masculinity thing, and men wanting to lead is something that's negative. It couldn't be farther from the truth. No one is talking about a tyrant. We're talking about men who are not perfect, but striving to lead with integrity and character and love, and grace, and not force. That's not the men that we want to be, or the men in our families, or the families that we want to lead. But we don't want our families to be afraid of us. We want our families to respect us and to see us as a proper leader for them. And then for the young kids, I would say that it's a journey. When I look at my life, I see the journey. I see the ups and the downs, and the times where I've fallen short, the times where God had to continually get my attention, and I still rebelled, and I still went the other way. And so for the kids, especially the young men, I would want them to know that, what you see from me, what you see from you, ultimately is, I hope that it is a picture that is of value. And, when you look at me or you or all these other men who are striving to become better and striving to lead lives that honor Christ, they can mirror them to what they see in the world, and see what is promoted and what kind of man is raised to the top. And they can go, that's not the kind of man that I want to be. This is the kind of man that I want to be. And so we have to do our parts of doing podcasts like this, of getting into our communities and making ourselves available to the young boys, because ultimately a lot of the issue is everything that the world has to offer is so available. It's right on their phones. When you go on TikTok, the first thing that pops up isn't a Christian podcast. When you go on Instagram, that's not the first thing. A lot of those pages are even shadow banned, and not pushed to the forefront as others. And so we have to do our job of being available and being active in our local churches, and ultimately understanding the issue and being able to meet the need head on physically, and not only through a screen. And so I want to be a mirror to a young kid that's going, I want to be like Jonathan Isaac. I want to be, again, not perfect, but a man who's striving to honor God and seeing how God is either blessing or flourishing or teaching him. And I want to follow that, and to leave that on the table, because at the end of the day, we have our own choices and decisions to make.
Well, I have two sons, one of which is actually in basketball camp this week. So I know that,
Nice.
After this episode, they like to watch all my episodes. I know you'll be an example that, he'll be looking at for the future, and I'll be encouraging him to do that. Something about manhood. David Cohn from the Daily Wire was on here a few episodes ago, and he recommended a book to me called The Intentional Father. I would recommend that book to you because I've read a lot of fatherhood books, and it takes the cake. And it's specifically for raising boys, but it touches on all aspects of fatherhood. I think you'd get a lot out of it. But as far as boys go, everybody wants to talk about raising the author. I'm paraphrasing the author. Everybody wants to talk about raising great men, but they bypass the fact that we have to teach them what it means to be a man first. You can't be a great man if you don't know what it means to be a man. And in a world that's trying to strip ourselves of manhood, we need to promote that as being virtuous and not apologize for it. So I like a lot of the things you said there. All right, we're going to have a couple fun questions here. So your Mount Rushmore of basketball, 4 guys, and I'm going to go first.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I'm going MJ, LeBron, Kareem, and Bill Russell. I got MJ and LeBron for obvious reasons. Kareem, 6 champion. He's kind of LeBron with more rings. He had the scoring championship until LeBron got it. And then Bill Russell, I mean, the guy won 10 rings, so he's the king of that.
I'm gonna be true to, me and you are different eras, and my Mount Rushmore is gonna be true to what I've seen and what I kind of know to be true for me. Like,
hey, by the way, I am older than you. Okay. A lot older than you. I'm 40. I know you're not near that.
Oh, you're not.
But I wasn't around when Bill Russell was playing in Korea. Okay. I just want to make that very clear for the listeners.
So that's kind of what I mean. Like,
but you're playing with these guys, so you have a different perspective.
Yeah. So for me, for Bill Russell to be on mine, it would be just saying it because, he's an all-time great in history, but I've never watched a clip of Bill Russell. I don't know I don't even know what his game was like.
This is the Jonathan Isaac Mount Rushmore.
Yeah, this is the Jonathan Isaac Mount Rushmore. I'm gonna go with LeBron. I'm gonna go with Kobe. I'm gonna go with KD.
Wow.
Yeah. And I know this is blasphemy because, Michael Jordan is considered the greatest player ever. And I co-sign to that. I think LeBron's career rivals that. But at the end of the day, to each his own. But for my 4th spot, I'm not going to go MJ. I'm going to leave him off because, again, I've only ever seen him play on, YouTube. And obviously there's just the mystique of his career. But I'm going to go Steph. So I'm going to go LeBron, Kobe, KD, and Steph.
All right, I would say your Mount Rushmore is the hot take version of Mount Rushmore. I don't know that I've ever seen one with MJ off of it, but hey, we like hot takes on this show. We like virality, so maybe I can get that out there. All right, a little more challenging.
Okay.
Mount Rushmore of humans, 4 people of character that you admire.
Mount Rushmore of humans. Got to go Jesus.
Bingo, man. That's where I was hoping you were starting.
Gotta go Jesus in the number 1 spot. And then I'm going to go Paul. I'm going to go Paul in the number 2 spot because his Romans 6, 7, and 8 have just spoken to me. And I try my best to get back to reading them over and over again. But just the obviously his story, by the grace of God, his ability to get the gospel out, and just his journey, from Saul to Paul, to doing it all from prison. There's a fantastic movie called Paul. And I found that a lot of people actually haven't seen it, but it's a great movie. It's called Paul. And it tells the story of like him being in prison and Nero and the whole thing and Luke and, the people kind of hiding away and that whole night. It's a beautiful film. They did it great. But Paul number 2. And then from there, I'm going to go more mainstream. I'm going to go with William Lane Craig. He is an apologist. So when I first, I talk about it in the book, but I got invited to a chapel when I was a rookie. I went to the chapel. The chaplain says, Luke 6:46, why do you call me Lord, Lord, and not do what I say? The verse really stuck with me. And I knew that I was not living the life that would be considered a Christian, but I still call myself a Christian. And I said to myself, I'm going to figure out if this thing is true or not. And how I talked about apologetics is one thing, and then ultimately seeing it modeled out as another. That's exactly what happened to me. I dove into Christian apologetics. Frank Turek, Ravi Zacharias, John Lennox, but William Lane Craig was the OG. And I listened to his lectures, I listened to his debates, and his understanding of a lot of these different arguments that ultimately make it plausible for there to be a God, a non-created creator. And so yeah, a lot of time there. And so I'll put him number 3. And then I gotta go my wife, man. I gotta go my wife with the number 4 spot. My mom might be mad at that, but I love her too. But I'm gonna go my wife, man. She has, it's hard to, when you talk about manhood and you talk about growth and you talk about just like, yeah, just what it means to be a man. Like she has seen me a certain way, and regardless of my failures, insecurities, my bumps along the road of becoming more of a man has not changed her view of me. And it has taught me about love. It's taught me about grace. It's taught me about relationship, and ultimately marriage. And so I gotta put her number 4. She'll appreciate that, but it's really is the truth. She's the OG. Yeah.
They say behind every great man is a great woman, but it sounds like you and I are similar. Behind us, there's a woman. They're not behind us. They're right by our side. Sometimes we're behind them. So great answer there. All right. One more fun one. Pre-game rituals.
Pre-game rituals. I'm honestly not that crazy. I like to listen to my Christian music. My Christian rap is playing really all day on game days. Yeah, that's really
Pre-game
it.
rap and lace up some UNITUS.
I play. Yeah, exactly. Put my UNITUS kicks on. I play my Christian rap and I get ready to go.
Cool. All right, just a couple more. So kind of putting a cap on all this, you've written the book, you've launched this brand, and you're making history in the NBA, all while staying true, to your conviction. So what is God putting on your heart right now? What does Jonathan Isaac over the next 5 to 10 years look like? What do you want to do next?
I mean, I definitely want to continue to play basketball at a high level. I want to be in the field, man. I want to be of service, and of value to other people. You talked about young men. I want to be able to impact the world for Christ, and whatever capacity that looks like. I think UNITUS is definitely an arm in which God is leading me in, and I think that doing that is a part of it. As much as I dislike speaking, I could see a future of years down the road of being convicted to start a church and try to preach the gospel and really just be, my desire is to be a church that impacts the community in a real way, regardless of what it is that you believe. We're here to help and serve, and I would want to create a church where the community is better off because the church is there, regardless if you come to the church or not. Obviously, that takes resources and things. It's not an easy 1, 2, 3 thing to do. So I'm not saying that it is. Yeah, I want to be of service. I want to build the brand. I want to leave an impact. I want to continue to raise my babies and build a family and a marriage that I'm really proud of.
Awesome. All right. So I'll get you out of here on this. We're in the middle of the NBA finals. By the time this airs, they'll probably be concluded. So I won't embarrass you with some good or bad prediction, but what are your plans for the off season?
My plans, I actually got something crazy going on. So one plan is, obviously just the work. I'm going to work. I'm going to spend time with the family. We'll take a few trips. But there's a crazy missionary mission opportunity that was put before me. So pretty much there's a country called Bhutan, and it's a wild story and a true story where there's an ex-NBA player. I'm missing his name, but he has been deeply involved in missions since he's left the league, probably some 10, 15 years ago, and he's evangelized in all these different places. And one of the least, I guess, tourist places where they let people in the world is Bhutan. And I'm not even going to try to tell you where it is on a map, but I believe it has Chinese background and it's over there. Apparently the king of Bhutan has league pass, NBA league pass.
Oh,
And,
wow.
And the And the people who have been trying to get into the country for a while to evangelize, this missionary group, have been working with the officials of, Bhutan. And they said, the king says he will allow you to come into the country if you bring an NBA player. And so me and a few of the other NBA players, I think, AJ Green, Justin Holiday, Mason Plumlee are a few that are kind of already signed up, are going to go to Bhutan at the end of July and spend some time there, be able to meet with the king, but ultimately be able to just have fun and pour into the youth. And I'm sure we'll do some basketball stuff and some evangelizing stuff as well.
Well, that's cool. That's a lot of work for the off season, man. You're like running full time, but you're doing the Lord's work, and that's
it's only a few days. It's only a few days over there. It's not bad.
It sounds like you're doing what you always do. You're leading by example. You changes people's lives, and you're dunking basketballs. And I know you're coming to us from the facility, so get back to work, man. We wish you all the best, Jonathan.
Appreciate it, man. This is awesome.
We the people. Why you quiet? It's time to stand up for the truth. And they coming for our kids, so who gon' stand up for the youth? Ay, and we know we win because Yeshua is the proof. Ay, we the people like Gates Garcia, so that's no excuse.